Welcome to Holyrude Ungagged, the Citizen Kane of political podcasts. I don't think we have we don't have an official name for this podcast episode yet, but it might very well be the Tories are at it again. We had Murdo Fraser going on the radio in Manchester encouraging people to defy a travel ban. Then we had another Tory elected member, Joy Morrissey, who launched a campaign to get a picture of the Queen in every British home. Not something that particularly appeals to me, but she's trying it anyway. Then, we've got the Matt Hancock affair, who resigned as Health Secretary this week. That is just one of a couple of segments that we're calling More Tory Corruption. It was suggested by Deborah, actually, that we could have a regular feature about Tory corruption every week. And I rather naively thought, well, is there going to be an example of that every single week? So far, yes, quite easily. There's several things we can talk about in that segment this week, so we'll keep that going as long as we can. And I'm sorry to say, I get the feeling it'll probably run for a while. And we also had Labour MSP Katie Clark, who came out in favour of an independent referendum if the Parliament votes for one. This obviously contradicts the hardline stance that Scottish Labour leader Anas Sarwar has laid out previously. If there's anything else you'd like us to talk about on Holyrude Ungagged, you can tweet us at _ungagged with the hashtag Holyrude Ungagged, or you can send us an email, ungaggedleft@gmail.com, and just put Holyrude Ungagged in the subject line. And I'm being joined by my eternal colleagues, Brian Stewart-Finlay and Deborah Torrance this week. So I think that's all that's been to be said, and let's get ungagged. Welcome everybody to another fun-packed episode of Holyrude Ungagged. How are we all doing this morning?
Good. Just drinking my tea, having a nice wee chill out time myself.
Very good. It's a lovely morning, nice and warm.
I've got to say, recording at 10 a.m. hits very differently when the Waynes are off school and I've not been up already to take them to school. So feeling a wee bit more tired than I normally do.
This is like way mid-morning for me. I'm awake at 6 o'clock in the morning, so lunchtime.
So am I, but I try to get back to sleep.
The early bird catches the worm.
So it does.
No, I'm a night owl, so I don't catch any worms.
There is no owlness about me at all, because as soon as it gets to 9:30, it's bedtime. I've got a wedding coming up next, on Saturday. And they were like, oh yeah, but just remember the restrictions, it'll be finishing at 10:30. I'm like, thank God. Could you imagine if you have to stay up to the usual time, 12:30 finishing? I don't know if I'd be able to cope with that. Because I think I've been up past 10 o'clock since the start of lockdown, if I'm honest. Crazy.
We're trying to figure out what we're doing for our 10th anniversary next month. So there's all kinds of ideas flying about, but kind of hard to juggle it when you're trying to get babysitters for 4 kids.
Yeah, I would not be doing that.
The current plan is to split them across 2 different babysitters, 2 and 2, so we'll see if that works. The trouble is, Melody, the 2-year-old, is so crazy that people volunteer to take the other 2, whatever one she's in. So. we'll take the older 2. It's like, we'll get 6 people willing to take the older 2. We need somebody to take the crazy one.
Oh, one you don't even isn't any bother. One's just a baby.
Well, babies are a different kind of bother.
Nah, that's cute.
Yeah, definitely more look after newborns or younger babies would generally be easier. But then it cancels out if your 2-year-old's the loudest one. Yeah,
well, the trouble is though, you have to cut it down because there'll be some people quite happy to babysit that if they no had kids themselves, they're a bit kind of nervous about changing nappies and stuff like that. So that cuts down on the potential babysitters.
That's true.
I hope you get a babysitter.
Definitely.
Or 2.
At least 2. Or 2. Or 3.
If any ungagged listeners want to volunteer.
Oh, let's crack on then and talk about the politics rather than my troubles. Okay, first up, feels like so much has happened this week. This feels like quite a long time ago, but I feel it's still worth mentioning. Murdo Fraser went on BBC Radio Manchester and encouraged people to defy the travel ban that had been brought in, which he called he said it was just bashing the English. So nothing to do with a global pandemic and thousands of people dying. It's all about anti-Englishness, according to Murdo. The presenter of the show said that they kind of went into the whole Scottish economy is basically based on getting a few tourists for Manchester, kind of enforcing that whole too wee, too poor, too stupid mythos. And then, like I said, Murdo Fraser just openly declared that he wanted everybody to come up to Scotland, completely in contradiction to the regulations, and claimed that Nicola Sturgeon didn't represent the people of Scotland, which I could have sworn we had a election recently and she won, so that usually means she gets to represent us. But no, according to Murdo. What are your thoughts on this then, Deborah?
I just thought it was a bit petulant, wasn't it? Contrary Mary. Anything to get a dig in it. Why are you laughing, Brian?
I love that phrase.
Yes, he's a contrary Mary. I mean, just anything to get a dig in at Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, like you said, she doesn't represent us. Well, actually, checks notes. Yep, SNP just won the recent election. I don't know. Nothing surprises me, Murdo, really. I'm not really got much except to say, check your local government guidelines. They give you all the advice. Don't listen to a guy trying to make a political point.
Brian?
Yeah, I mean, just to echo what Deborah was saying there, Murdo Fraser's someone who loves to criticise Nicola Sturgeon's government, but mostly through just random tweets. And you can criticize the government through social media, that's absolutely fine, but don't try and undermine public health advice. Particularly, I think that's one of the major issues with what he was doing here. But the fact that he's saying that Nicola Sturgeon doesn't represent Scotland is really bizarre point. As we've said, Nicola Sturgeon and the SNP won the election, which was only about 8 weeks ago, something like that, 8 maybe 9 weeks ago. And the fact that the devolved government is specifically responsible for public health and everything connected to that. For Murdo Fraser to try and make this to be some sort of anti-English sentiment or whatever. If you want to argue the basis for the decisions being made, then without making too much political capital and trying to position yourself to be the next leader of the Labour Party, then do it. But don't just take to social media and say, nah, just ignore what the Scottish government's got to say. Listen to me instead, when your party only got 25% of the vote. So we don't listen to the party who got, in the constituency vote, around 48% of the vote, that will listen to the Tories who are known in government. It's a really, really strange argument. But I think what's most worrying about this is that when you have loads of different voices and people undermining public health, which we'll come on to later, I'm sure, with Matt Hancock. But if you get people start muddying the waters and start saying, ignore this, ignore that, that's when public confidence starts to go. And because people are frustrated with this. Like, people are really frustrated with these, understandably so, like these different restrictions and rules being put into place. And I'm sure the Scottish government don't want to do it, and all the different authorities that have to put these restrictions in place don't want to do it because it goes against so many of the things that would be positive for whether it be economic or just being able to go and visit different places when we've been stuck here for so long. Yeah, I think it's just counterproductive and frustrating and muddying the water. And public confidence going down just results in people thinking it's okay to break the rules. We've seen it before with Barnard Castle, with Cummins during the first lockdown. People just already frustrated. We don't need to undermine public health even more than we need to, and we certainly don't have to give sort of credence to people that are getting really frustrated and undermining the public health messaging.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to Murdo Fraser. I mean, he was always a Tory, so I was never a fan. But I don't remember him always being quite as petty, and I think you said petulant, Deborah. It's probably a good word for it. He seems to be pursuing some kind of culture war sort of attitude these days. And,
quite divisive.
Yeah, like willing to burn the place down just to get a couple of extra percentage points in the polls.
Yeah, if you want to start, nitpicking at the government on social media about things, then, I'm sure there's other policy areas that you could do. Or perhaps we could do this, it would be better. Or perhaps we could fund this in a different way. Perhaps we could that's cool. Not during a global pandemic about public health advice, when people are finding it quite difficult to keep track of all the different rules that are in place, because they do change as the pandemic evolves. What was the rules 2 weeks ago necessarily aren't in place now, and that's why it's important to check the government health advice, and also just to follow the First Minister's addresses as she does them quite regularly, and to find out what the up-to-date advice is. But just don't undermine public health advice, particularly something that's constantly moving. There's loads of different moving parts to this, whether it's restrictions, whether it be everything else to do with testing and all these types of things. So just don't muddy the water even more than it needs to.
I just think it's funny that Tory is contradicting the leader of the parliament that he's employed in, when he's the Tories are always going on about the authority of the Prime Minister and how the UK government is on the ball, they know what's happening, you should listen to what Boris Johnson's saying. So, I mean, maybe that's what his gig is. Maybe he's just sucking up to who he sees as the authority, and maybe he's just sucking up to Boris Johnson instead of Nicola Sturgeon. Maybe that's what he's trying to do.
Even weirder than that, he seems to try to suck up to Andy Burnham.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe he wants a job.
Maybe he's thinking of crossing the floor.
Oh, I doubt it.
I mean, Andy Burnham's still going on about this as well. I mean, last week I was fairly sort of, I don't know, I didn't feel that strongly about it. Like, he was upset that he hadn't been notified, and I was kind of like, well, maybe he should have been notified. Maybe that was an oversight, whatever. But it's like a week later, and he's still moaning about it. It's like, right, dry your eyes and move on.
Yeah, the development of Andy Burnham's, I don't know, feud or whatever it is, Twitter spat. Grievance, good word, grievance, right? Because it started off with, sharing the social media, oh, I'm not very happy about this, I'm going to write to the First Minister. Fair enough. Get it. You've made your point. We can move on. And then he's on Andrew Marr, like on a question that's not even related to that, talking about this. And then every single media appearance after that to, raise a grievance against the Scottish Government. And similar to you, I actually had quite a lot of sympathy with his position last week and said, well, do you know what? The Scottish Government are always correctly point out when they're being ignored by UK government, etc. So, the Scottish Government perhaps should be making sure that they're being as inclusive as they possibly can, and including local authorities in any decisions that's going to be made. But I mean, come on. It was a not threat. So, yeah, they're taking them to court, I think, over the losses that people can make through cancellations. Yeah, there's a global pandemic, and unfortunately, a lot of travel that's been put in place is really precarious, and things can change at any time. And I think people know that. But yeah, it's annoying. It's not great. But unfortunately, that's the nature of the beast at the moment, and it's not great.
Exactly.
I mean, I would be surprised if how many people are losing money out of this, in terms of, we're a year into a pandemic where there's been a lot of rule changes, sometimes no much notice. Who's booking a holiday and not making sure they get free cancellation?
Yeah, definitely. I think all companies have changed their policies to be more inclusive of cancellations, or at least been able to change that. I'm sure there is unscrupulous people out there that haven't, but I think it's just important for anybody that's looking to put any travel arrangements in place, or ensure that they've got really good travel insurance in place to ensure that they're not going to get stung like that. Yeah,
I mean, I think most companies realise that in the current situation, if you don't offer free cancellation, then people will just book with somebody that does, because it's a lot more important than it seemed like a year, 18 months ago. Quite often, if I was booking stuff, the free cancellation was a wee bit more, and I would just say, I'll just save the £15-20. I wouldn't do that now, though, because we've seen that things can come out of nowhere.
Can I just talk just very briefly about the entitlement of folk who are like, oh, I can't go on holiday, I can't travel up to Skye, I can't do this. That's a real luxury. That's like, to be able to do that, to have the funds, to have the support for, if you're looking after Wayne's, like you were talking earlier on, David, that to me, it's a level of this self-righteous entitlement. Oh, I go with my wife in a caravan from Salford to Arisaig every year, and I will not stop just for a pandemic. And it's like, well, if you love that place so much, you should really care about bringing in a possible new variant. to the local community, because the levels of infection right now of coronavirus are really high. I'm acutely aware of it, only just having my second jag, still feeling a bit, you can still transmit this disease. I could take this to my elderly mum, and even though she's got the jag, could she still get it? Because there's so many unknowns still. We still don't know the extent and the repercussions of folk who might now be long-term disabled because they've had coronavirus. Like, there's so many different things that people are like, but I want to go to my caravan site in bloody Mallaig. Like, it's very infuriating. I'm sorry for that wee rant, but it's a luxury and a privilege to be able to go travelling, and I'd like folk to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember where I heard it, but I did hear a quote recently, and it was somebody moaning, and they used the phrase, "I'm sick of being trapped in the country." And it's like, well, there's a hell of a lot of people out there that's their whole life. Like, there's people who can't afford holidays, and people need a wee bit of perspective at times, I think.
Absolutely. And I think the only people that I have real sympathy for is people that have family abroad, so people that are immigrants and they live here. And I know just from some colleagues at the university that I work in that haven't seen their family since probably Christmas time, a year past.
Wow.
Things like that. I have real sympathy for that. But yeah, to echo completely what you're saying about holidays, it is a complete privilege. And I understand how frustrated people have become. I know people that are shielded, I know people that are disabled and that they've not been able to get out at all. People have literally been shielding, and for these people to maintain the accessibility to being able to just go out and about and not feel, it's not at the levels where they feel that they need to be shielding again. Well, perhaps that's what we should be protecting is for these people, more vulnerable people to still be able to get out and about, because there is a lot of unknowns when it comes to transmission with the virus and the risk of mutations, because the rates are increasing incredibly high.
Yeah.
And to take this back to the main point, to have conservative politicians trying to undermine public health advice when the Conservatives have held a lot of the responsibility for the bad decisions being made, which has caused the cases to spiral out of control on several occasions, and to have such a high death rate. I would argue that they are culpable for a lot of the decisions that have made that have led to that, and to have another Conservative politician undermining it again, I think is really reprehensible.
Before we move on for this story, I think we need to point out the most important part. When I was reading, I think it was the article was in the National about this. I got to the bottom of the article and found I was quoted in it.
Oh, that's nice.
What did you say?
I just said that I felt there should be consequences for public officials that undermine public health measures. The only thing I could think of was the spelling mistake I saw in my tweet, and I'll need to check it to see if it's my spelling mistake or if it was the National when they transcribed it. So I noticed that late last night when everybody else was sleeping and I had nobody to tell. And I was just wandering around my house going, oh, I get quoted. Didn't even know it.
And there's nothing worse as well when you've got, you've obviously done something at the heat of the moment, you've tweeted something and then it starts to get shared loads and you're like, I never put a space in between the two words, or I've got my E's and O's mixed up or something, you're like, damn it.
Yeah, especially because you can't edit a tweet. Like, at least a Facebook post you can edit. There was also a bit of a development in terms of Scottish independence when Labour MSP Katie Clark came out in favour of independence referendum if the Scottish Parliament votes for it. It really shouldn't be breaking news that MSP believes in democracy, but that's where we are at the moment. So our stance is in contradiction to Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar's stance, who removed a candidate because she said something very similar. Holly Cameron. Katie Clark's seen as being on the left of the party despite being a member of the House of Lords. She's in the campaign for socialism and was associated with Corbyn when he was leader. What do you think? Do you think this is the beginning of Labour maybe softening, and we've been talking about it for a long time, but maybe turning towards independence, or at least being open to it? Deborah?
Baroness Katie, isn't she?
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it's weird being a socialist and being in the House of Lords. It's like an oxymoron, is it not?
Yeah, I had the exact same thought when I was looking at it when it said that she'd taken a leave of absence from the House of Lords to run for the Scottish Parliament. And I was like, how does this tie up with being a member of the Campaign for Socialism?
And I was reading her comment that she said that's supposed to be, this radical thinking. It's quite mundane, really. She's just saying the Scottish Parliament should have the power to decide on whether we have a referendum or not. Like, if the decision's taken there, passed in Holyrood, then who are Westminster to decline it, really? Like, and that's me exaggerating on the language. Like, it was really a mundane statement that she said. Just was common sense, really, in my opinion.
Yeah, I seen the clip getting shared by like STV or something like that. I was like, they had that, like, Scottish Labour MSP supports another independence referendum, and I was like, what a boring video that was. Like, it was, like you said, it was essentially saying something that just, to me, seems common sense. I know it seems common sense for Anna Sawar and perhaps some in the Scottish Labour Party, that even if the majority of Scottish parliamentarians vote in favour of an independence referendum, it should be somehow blocked or somehow stopped from a Conservative UK government in Westminster, which to me sounds a lot more problematic and a lot more concerning or newsworthy than somebody simply agreeing that the Scottish legislators should be able to legislate when and if and how we hold an independence referendum. But yeah, the whole taking a suspension from the House of Lords to run as an MSP is a bit of it's quite hard to wrap your head around that, Corbyn supporter come socialist campaigner from the House of Lords. I mean, if you want to go in the House of Lords and just constantly put forward a motion to dissolve the House of Lords, and you constantly keep doing that and disrupting process, then that's what you do. If that's really what you think is the best way to do it, because I believe that was how the Green Party originally accepted, the Green Party of England and Wales originally accepted their first peerage. But I don't really go with that line of taking on the House of Lords in general. But yeah, I just thought it was a bit of an odd one to get your head around.
I've got the quote here that she said. She told the BBC, "I didn't campaign for a referendum. I don't think there should be a referendum now. However, if the Scottish Parliament were to vote for one, my view is that that should happen." She done a double that. That's why I stuttered. Sorry, that was in the quote.
It was her stutter, not yours.
It was her stutter, not mine. But it's very mundane. I mean, I don't know why it's been hailed as radical. But as you say, that lassie that had stood for the Labour MSP, she was
Holly Cameron. She
was ousted for her position, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was a candidate. I think, was it Kelvin? I might be wrong about that, but yeah, she made the quotes, and a few days later, she was quite spectacularly dumped as a candidate, despite having the support of her local branch.
Well, she's not a baroness, is she?
That's true. And
that is also true, yeah.
Katie Clark's already in the door, and I'm presuming because of her background in terms of being linked to a campaign for socialism and Corbyn, that she's probably not sort of within Anis Sarwar's sort of camp within the Labour Party. So I don't know, maybe this is just a kind of internal Labour Party politics and a way of sort of taking a dig at Anis Sarwar, because it's quite a difficult position, I think, for the Labour leadership to sustain, that even if the Scottish Parliament votes for a referendum, they still don't think it should be allowed to happen. You don't get far when you stand on a platform of opposing democracy. People don't like that, even if they actually agree with you on the issue. That doesn't sit right with most people, I don't think.
There seemed like a real glimmer of hope at one point with Scottish Labour, didn't they? But like after the last general election, and I say a glimmer of hope when it comes to the constitution with Scottish Labour. When the SNP done really well, the Scottish Labour lost all their seats apart from one, and people like Jed Killen and Monica Lennon were saying, we need to be more open-minded. Clearly, the electorate's trying to tell us something. If the Scottish Parliament votes in favour of something, along those lines, and it seemed quite positive. And that was the position that Monica Lennon had during the leadership campaign for Scottish Labour. And I was starting to feel quite optimistic during that campaign that we might have started to see something a little bit more positive, or even just neutral from Scottish Labour, rather than just being really opposed to something all the time. I mean, you can support the principle of holding a referendum, and you can still, as a party, disagree with independence for X, Y, and Z. But I think, beyond that, the two issues are separate, and it's really bizarre. Like it just seems like Scottish Labour are just not listening. But then, of course, that's been the case for quite a while, isn't it?
Yeah.
Since about 2000 and will we even say 15? I think I'm being kind when I say that.
That's really kind.
I was going to say 2007.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I'd go with that, yeah.
The noughties. It was in the noughties they lost their edge, really, wasn't it?
Or their ears.
Or their ears,
Yeah, I mean, we all sort of know, I think we all know Labour Party members that are at very least open to independence, if not outright support it. But I just wonder how long Scottish Labour Party can keep a lid on that, like through, I mean, I think the Holly Cameron thing was sending a clear message to their own members that anybody that tries to sort of deviate from this extreme unionism will be punished and will be, and she was very much made a public example of.
Mhm.
But I don't think you can keep people quiet through fear forever. I think it's definitely coming that there'll be some kind of changes within Labour, whether it's potentially some kind of breakaway or just more open infighting about it, because that sort of minority of pro-indie Labour people, I think, is growing all the time. And at some point, they're going to say, like, why are we allowing ourselves to be bullied into silence here, and instead of being honest about what we actually support?
Do you remember when Kes Dugdale was leader? And I always got the vibe from Kezia that she wasn't that into the uber unionism. Like she might have parroted a lot of the words, but I didn't get that genuine she loved Britain. And I thought when she stopped being the leader, there was a real void from Richard Leonard, like he was uber unionism. And now Anna Sarwar, he's even more into professing about the union than Richard Leonard was. And I just think, as you say, that there has to come a sort of crescendo where the lid sort of boils out and everything boils over. Because the people I know in Labour, long time, staunch Labour, supporters, they're not that motivated by denying Scotland's democracy.
No, I mean, again, it happened when Katie Clark came out and said this, but the Labour leadership, I think, are paranoid that every time anything like this happens, the Scottish Tories jump on it, and they seem absolutely terrified that they might lose votes to the Tories over this. But I don't see how they can keep sustaining this sort of middle road of displaying themselves, trying to out-Tory the Tories when it comes to being unionists.
And that's
Because
not attractive.
it's not working so far. Like that's not how long have they been stuck in third place now? I mean, that would be unthinkable a generation ago. And they don't seem to be going anywhere else. So they might as well try to plot a new course and a more honest course based on what their members actually believe in, rather than, try to cling on to the coattails of whatever unionist vote still supports them over the Tories.
And also they're out of sync with the STUC as well, which I think is really, really important. And I think the STUC position, if I remember it all correctly, is a really valid position, and it's quite a really pragmatic approach, saying that they don't support an independence referendum straight away, which both the Scottish government and the Greens also believe that the dealing of the health aspects of the global pandemic is the most important thing. But if the Scottish Parliament votes for one, then there should be one, and they support that principle. That's all Scottish Labour has to do. And if they then want to allow a free reign of their elected members to support independence or not, and 96 or 97% of them choose to vote back the union and they've got a few breakaway, that's fine. Like that's absolutely fine. And I just think that, first of all, for Scottish Labour to be out of step from the STUC in itself is, they're kind of showing themselves up a little bit. To be honest, particularly because I know a lot of the vocal people in the STUC and the various different unions are pro-independence. So a lot of the younger members particularly. So they're out of step and they're alienating a new voter base for them completely. And, like we were just touching on there, if they continue to try and out-Tory the Tories, which they'll never be able to do because the Tories do it so cringe-worthily well, that they won't be able to outdo it. So they're just going to be stuck in the sort of middle ground, unionist, but not seen as unionist enough in some eyes, and not appealing to younger people, that perhaps might be interested in independence or even just having an independence referendum, so we can have that discussion. I just think that they're just basically making their pond smaller and smaller and smaller that they want to fish from, which I hate that phrase, but it's the only one that's coming to my head at the moment. That basically they're just making it more and more challenging for them to attract voters. They're just alienating people. And I think that the people at the top of Scottish Labour, the Jackie Baileys of the world, the only name that's popping straight to my head, Anna Sarwar as well, that I just don't think that reflects the radicalism that a lot of the younger people, particularly in areas like the STUC, it doesn't reflect that. And there's just a disconnect there.
Anybody else get anything they want to say about this before we move on?
No, I just wanted to confirm you both agree that there's been an escalation in their unionism. They're trying to become this uber British nationalist. And I don't think that's in Labour's DNA.
No, I think as they see their own sort of voter base and their own membership sort of become a bit more open to independence, and maybe not even open to independence, but just a bit less sort of obsessed with the union.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they see, I think the leadership feel as if they need to be even more unionist to try and keep it all together.
Step it up.
Yeah, because I think if they loosen that sort of grip, it'll all come apart, because I think lots of Labour members, I think, would then be openly come out and say that they support independence as well as supporting a referendum, because it's baby steps for Katie Clark. Like you said, it wasn't like a great radical statement she made, but this is probably about as radical as she could get away with within the confines of what the current Labour leadership will allow. And as we saw before, they didn't allow that when a candidate said it, but I suppose it's more difficult to sack an actual sitting MSP than it is a candidate.
And Baroness.
And also, I agree to an extent what you're saying, that there does seem to be that sort of shift towards unionism within Scottish Labour, in Scottish Labour specifically. I would absolutely agree with. I think what Anna Sarwar tried to achieve during the Holyrood campaign was that sort of adult in the room thing, and I spoke about this in the very first podcast, was the adult in the room. The next 5 years should be about getting over this pandemic and, talking about the bread and butter issues. Yes, these are really important, but you can't talk about these issues if you just completely ignore something that's clearly dominating politics. And we've seen that in the results. We saw tactical voting on the unionist side. So you can come across as, the most articulate politician talking about the issues that focus groups are telling you that people want to hear about. But unfortunately, the Constitution is dominating a lot of that discussion. And the only way, if Scottish Labour ever want to be in power again in Scotland, whether we become an independent country or not, is to have another independence referendum, because the vote, the Holyrood elections that we're going to get, see if we just, in the stalemate, and we held a Holyrood election every year, we would get very similar results to what we got. Yeah, because there wasn't a massive shift between 2016 and 2021. And look at everything that's happened during that time. It just shows you that the Constitution is just dominating it. If you want to get the SNP out, the only way to do that is to hold a referendum and then let that outcome that comes out of that referendum be the starting point of new politics in Scotland, because it's not going to dramatically change, and Scottish Labour are going nowhere. Yeah,
they're totally caught between two stools. Not unionist enough for the unionists and not progressive enough for the pro-independence side in the most part. And you're absolutely right. Another referendum would be great for Labour, because no matter what the result, if we were independent, then they could just focus on the bread and butter grown-up issues that Anna Sarwar kept going on about. And if, God forbid, the pro-independence side lost, it would need to be kicked into touch for probably 20 odd years, and it wouldn't. So either way, it's not going to dominate after that, and it's so self-defeating, Labour's attitude at the moment. But fingers crossed, Katie Clark's contribution is the first of many. I'd like to see more MSPs or MPs or just anybody associated with Labour start to sort of challenge the leadership on that kind of hardline unionist position.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
If there's anyone listening who's in Scottish Labour that wants to speak up, please do it.
Definitely. And talking about hardline unionists, the next topic we can talk about is Tory MP Joy Morrissey. She's launched a campaign in conjunction with the British Monarchist Society. I bet they're at fun at parties, aren't they? And they want to put a picture of the Queen in every British home and public space. He's going to be ordering, guys. What do you think?
No. End of discussion. No. The only image of the Queen that I want to see put into homes right across the world, or right across the land, is putting more money in people's pockets. Whether that be through a UBI, whether that be through better welfare, whether that be through,
that was such a clever phrase. Well done.
Do you like that one? That just came to me. And you know what? Yeah.
You stole what I was going to say.
I'll be honest. I thought you were going another direction there. I thought you were saying, no, the image of the Queen I want to see is in a guillotine.
No. Yeah. So basically, it's just putting money in people's pockets, and ideally through a UBI, ideally through changing employment law to rid ourselves of exploitative zero-hour contracts, poor pay, gig economy, all these types of things, these really important bread and butter adult issues, then that's the only increase of the Queen's face I would like to see in homes across the UK.
I don't know. I mean, if it's a nice pop arty sort of image, it might look nice. I doubt it very much. The one I saw, it was like her coronation picture. I was thinking loads of people have just got grey was nowadays. That's a bit too much. Like I don't know.
I don't know whether they were clear. Is it going to be the exact same picture they want everybody to have, or is it going to be sort of the Queen
Any
on holiday?
picture. The Queen doing that Nazi salute. I don't know. No, but you stole my point. I was going to say the only picture of the Queen I want to see is money in my pocket.
I saw the actual thread and the image, the first image of was it Joy that put that image on, saying, because this all stems from this university, was it Oxford or Cambridge? Oxford, and it was about a common room that had voted to remove a picture of the Queen, right? And this is just a student body said, we don't want to have a picture of the Queen up in our common room anymore. We've voted to take it down. They didn't destroy it. They didn't burn it on the green outside the university. It's away in safekeeping, right? But Guido Fawkes, which is the right-wing order.com or whatever they're called, made this into a massive story about silence and free speech when actually the students voted democratically to remove the picture of the Queen. And then Joy shared an image of the picture that she has in her house of the Queen, and I was like, what a boring tweet. And it just sort of sets the tone for the fantastic organisation that she stands up for, and the fantastic idea of making sure there's images of the Queen in everybody's house. And if you want to have a picture of the Queen in the house, have a picture of the Queen in the house. If you want to have a picture of Jenny Halliwell in your house, have a picture of Jenny Halliwell in your house. But to have this campaign to encourage people to have a picture of the monarch in their house is verging on a bit weird.
Yeah.
And a bit authoritarian, which apparently is bad in free speech, but it's all right if a Tory does it.
Yeah, that whole thing with the Oxford University common room, it's like literally some students redecorated and it made headline news across the country for days. What came across to me is, again, I feel as if I have to say this every week about Tories, how completely out of touch they are with people.
Yeah.
They are pushing this as a great attempt at national unity. Their idea that the Queen is this great unifying figure. I'm from the west of Scotland. The Queen is not a unifying figure where I come from.
I'm surprised they didn't do that One Britain, One Nation thing and gave all the Waynes at school a poster of the Queen. Like, they missed a trick. They missed a trick.
Joined up thinking there.
Missed a trick there.
Or just give them stamps, because you always need stamps.
Oh my God, how useful would that be? I think that we should start a thing where everybody gets free stamps, because stamps are dear, man.
Stamps are really dear, but you always need them when you've got a letter to post and you never have them. So if you want to give us a picture of the Queen, universal basic income and free stamps.
I love it.
It's a vision of one of you is trying to stick the free picture in the front of an envelope and use it as a stamp.
Absolutely.
Good work.
This is a platform if anyone wants to stand for politics in the next wee while. Picture of the Queen in every household, universal basic income, and free first class stamps.
What the kind of articles I read, it wasn't entirely clear who was intending to pay for it, because it was going to be free for them that wanted it. But I wasn't clear if they were wanting the government to pay for it or the British Monarchist Society putting the money up.
The Queen herself.
She could afford it.
Aye.
Because depending who's paying for it will definitely influence whether I want one, because if it's coming from taxpayer money, then I'm not interested. But if it's some rich Tories putting the money up for it, I'll have 10.
Aye, order 10. Loads.
In case I need something for the fire pit during the winter.
Put it at the end of your zip slide. Just fire into it 2 feet.
I did see a good tweet that quote tweeted this story and said, my God, they're going to fund free dartboards.
Oh dear. Right,
so I just want to do a quick survey again. Nobody here is wanting a picture of the Queen.
No thanks. Unless it's on.
Deborah, you said you wanted to see it first to see if it.
Oh well, yeah. I will see what it looks like first. I'm on the fence.
Well, if you had like a pop art Warhol version, like the Marilyn Monroe image, something like that, you'd be interested. I don't think that's what Joy would be going for. Judging by the image of the Queen that she had, I don't think that's what she'd be going for. But I can see the attraction if we had a pop art Warhol version of the Queen, then maybe.
I just think if you said that, Deborah, you get a cheek having a go at Katie Clark.
Clearly, I'm a monarchist.
She took a peerage. You're willing to take a nice picture of the Queen if it's offered.
Same thing.
Typical SNP member, Brian.
Well, I wouldn't want to say.
Soft in monarchy.
Soft and monarchy. Are you done slagging me?
I'm done until I think of something else to say.
Okay.
I'm still trying to just get my head over this story of trying to give folk free pictures of the Queen. It's funny.
They hate free stuff any other time.
That's so true.
This is exactly what I'm getting round. It's like,
Corbyn was
like,
a communist for trying to give people free broadband, which would be a hell of a lot more useful to folk than a fucking A4 picture of Lizzie.
actual, especially in the context of the pandemic, like, you know, the SNP were getting slagged off for the free dentistry and stuff like that. And you're like, you want to give us a free picture of the Queen? I just think, you know, when you're having discussions about politics sometimes, and you just think you've woken up in some kind of strange land.
Yeah,
United
every
Kingdom.
Monday. Every Monday.
Every single Monday.
There was a bit last summer where the Tories, I don't know what happened to that idea, but they briefly floated the idea because of lockdown that maybe the free broadband thing. And I really remember the tweet. Somebody just went, "All right, does that mean it's not Maoist anymore?" Which is what they said it was, a Maoist plot or something when Jeremy Corbyn said it would be a good idea.
Oh, I know. It's just crazy. I mean, think about nationalised communication networks. Wild. You just rewind how many years that was no communism. Honestly.
It's only communist if the left want it. If the right wants the same thing, it's a reasonable and measured response.
But yeah, well, the SNP wanted free bridges. We should have seen the headline: "Bridge communism." Museum communism. Wild. Prescription communism. Wild.
Even though Boris is the sort of go-to guy for wanting random bridges built all over the place. Off the top of my head, that bridge in London that spent billions on that never happened. Yeah. Then he wanted a bridge to
Northern Ireland.
No, before that he wanted one from Kent to France.
Oh wow.
And then the one between Scotland and Northern Ireland.
How would the big ships get under that? Like, is the Channel know the busiest shipping lane in the world?
I'll be honest, I don't know if he thought it through.
All right. Oh.
I'm just going to make a wild guess and think from Kent to France wasn't really well thought out.
They've already got the Channel Tunnel, so what do they need a bridge for as well?
Because you can see it.
You can't get as good a photo op with a tunnel.
Exactly.
Right, well, we move on now to our new segment. I said in the intro that we'll keep this going as long as we can. I'm hopeful that we won't always have an example of massive corruption in the government that rule us, but I feel I'm being a wee bit idealistic there, to be honest, since we'll get a couple of stories this week about more Tory corruption.
More Tory corruption, more Tory corruption, more Tory corruption, more Tory corruption, more Tory corruption.
Okay, the first Tory corruption story we've got here is the one that I think dominated the headlines the last few days, and it's Matt Hancock's eventual resignation as Health Secretary after a video emerged of him in a compromising position with a member of his staff, which was clearly in breach of COVID regulations. It later transpired they were having an affair and that a firm linked to her family had won a £28 million NHS contract. He initially tried to hold on to his job, and he did receive the backing of the Prime Minister before changing his mind and resigning on Saturday night. I think it was Saturday. I take it you've all seen the pictures and the video?
No, because I don't read The Sun.
The attitude that was in that voice there was amazing.
Funny, you don't read The Sun, but you love the Queen.
Go figure. It was everywhere, wasn't it? Like, when you first saw it, my niece messaged me and went, "Matt Hancock, is there a worse human being in this planet?" And I was like, "No, I don't think there is." And then she says, "Why is he nipping her like he's at our Chaos Unders?" And I thought that summed it up really beautifully, because it was, it's so creepy, man. I'll let you go, Brian, because he's creeped me out there just thinking about it.
I just saw the image. I've not seen the video. I don't want to see the video because I've seen a few screen grabs. Yeah, I've seen literally a few screen grabs of the image, and that's enough for me. But you know, this whole story, like, okay, as usual, Sun, big scoop. It's all about, you know, the sex scandal, blah blah blah. This isn't a sex scandal, and there was a really, really good tweet from the General Secretary of the UCU, Joe Grady, where the sex scandal and the framing of a sex scandal is a complete and utter distraction. Is the connection with the family of this individual, this aide, who's known for 20 years and who conveniently got a position in his department. So that's the story, in my opinion, anyway. Whatever cabinet ministers decide to get up to in their private lives, obviously don't breach COVID restrictions. It's really important. But in a normal context, I really couldn't care less. Their personal relations, if they're in an open relationship, if they're having affairs, that's for them to decide, and that's between their family to deal with. But what we should be really concerned about is the potential links to corruption in this one. And I think that as we've now had to create a jingle to encompass the huge size of the corruption and the stories that we're seeing coming out of this UK government, that's more what I'm concerned about. But there was a horrible extract from the Times, and I have going to the sort of more personal side, the fact that his wife, I don't know if you've seen this extract or not, because the wife had no idea that this was going on. Apparently she believed that everything was hunky-dory. So this is Matt Hancock's wife, and then the son had contacted Matt Hancock and said, we're going to run the story. He then had to drive home, tell his wife, wake his kids up, tell him he was leaving, and his wife has got long COVID, who she believes that she had caught from her husband. And I think that, if we take away the private lives of politicians away from that discussion, you think about that type of individual is responsible for the most vulnerable people in England, or was responsible for all these really vulnerable people during a global pandemic. Yet in his personal life, to something he really cares about, he put that individual through that. And I just think that is just so disturbing.
I'm just going to say how the health secretary, obviously a high-powered, busy job at the best of times. During the pandemic, that must have been one of the busiest jobs ever. But he was finding time to conduct an extramarital affair at the same time. Just I like to think in the face of a massive global pandemic with thousands of people dying, that the health secretary was working all the hours he could to try and fix that. It wouldn't have bothered me if they changed health secretary, because I'd imagine you could have been totally burned out trying to do that job during the pandemic. But I mean, clearly he was finding ways to relax, and clearly wasn't focusing on the job, because not only was he spending time with his girlfriend and top of his family, he must have been spending a lot of time hiding that from his family. So, or was he telling his wife that he was working in the pandemic when he was actually shacked up with his aide? It's just quite unseemly all around.
It really undermines their stay at home, control the virus, stick your tongue down your aide's throat. I think he's so corrupt anyway. If you go and look at the list of things that he's fucked up as health secretary anyway, and then this is just something new. But did this not happen in May? How are we just finding out about it? How's it just coming out now? This happened a month ago.
What did the Sun have a month ago though?
Well, I don't know. Why? Where's it been? Surely whoever had the footage or whatever would have been trying to give it to a newspaper. I'm pretty sure if I was a cleaner in an office and I happened to come across this recorded the CCTV, which it looks like to me like somebody's recorded.
Yeah, it looks like CCTV.
But it looks like somebody's recorded it on their phone, just in my opinion.
All right, yeah, I never thought of that. Could be.
So if it was me that had seen this, I'd be trying to punt it straight away.
Unless somebody done that as an insurance policy and maybe has recently lost their job or something like that.
Let me get my tinfoil hat.
Yes. There is a lot of quite spectacularly strange conspiracy theories flying about that. I was talking to some people trying to explore that the other night. A lot of people seem to think the whole thing is staged, and I'm like, to give him a reason to quit. And I'm thinking, well, did he need a reason to quit? He wouldn't be the first one to resign to spend more time with their family when there was looming scandals and questions about how well they'd done the job. I don't really see Matt Hancock sitting in a strategy meeting and agreeing to get publicly humiliated and humiliate his family over I don't know if the conspiracy theories are alleging that the whole affair is staged or just the video, but I just don't get the logic.
I just think, if you, first of all, you would have to agree to be Matt Hancock's girlfriend in this made-up situation. So, we can question whether we think that would ever actually happen. But anyway,
I was just going to say, I don't think, just watching the video, I don't think the woman's that into it, just from body language, being a woman, that just kept arching away from him. I'm not a psychologist or a body language expert, but just to me, she looked uncomfy, but that might just be because I was feeling so completely cringed at watching it. It was really gross, and Matt Hancock's dead creepy anyway, the way he stares and smiles.
There was a video I saw last year with him that re-emerged again, and it's just he has no concept of people's personal space. I mean, this was in the early days of the pandemic, and he was doing a kind of joint press conference with some kind of official from the NHS, I think she was, and he was standing 6 inches for her face while she was talking.
Yeah.
It was and she kept moving away. And he just kept kind of following her, and it was I don't think he's all right. He seems like a very strange person to me.
You know, we're talking about the connections between is it Gina Coladangelo? Apologies if I get the name wrong. Gina Coladangelo and her brother. I believe that there was links there, and there was a contract given to a family member there as well. But there's a really, really good piece in Open Democracy by Martin William, and it's basically shed some light that there is at least 16 individuals with close ties to the Conservative Party, including Tory donors, peers and former MPs, who have been given lucrative oversight jobs in key Whitehall departments as well.
Yeah.
So this expands way beyond, you know, just this massive explosive scandal story to basically just completely embedded cronyism and corruption.
Yeah, I read that article as well, and it's talking about how traditionally these are sort of, like I said, they're posts to provide oversight and to challenge the government on, you know, policies or strategies they're bringing in that maybe don't quite fit with what they're trying to do, because maybe they don't have that in-depth knowledge of the specific industry. Mm-hmm. And yet it does seem as if they've just became a sort of jobs for the boys kind of, what would you call it?
It's a kind of setup, really, isn't it?
A favour to be dished out. Like, there you go, there's a wee job for nothing, and you can just help me out every now and again, because the speculation seemed to be that she was really working more as a PR for him, even though her official job was nothing to do with that.
Yeah, it was like a non-executive position, but very senior within Whitehall, within the health department during a pandemic, which is really worrying. And there's other examples within that article too, where there's somebody like in the education department who doesn't, you know, may not have the in-depth knowledge required for that role. And it's basically just dishing out all these jobs to people that are connected. And we've seen this again and again with Michael Gove giving contracts to Dominic Cummings' company, or the company that has connections with Dominic Cummings. When is this cronyism actually going to be taken seriously by the votership? Because any poll that's done, it's like, oh, there's some corruption, Tories plus 2%. I just don't know when it's actually going to have an impact on these polls, and it's frightening.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if this will make a difference, because it seems like quite a throwback, like the way the media have went with this thing. It's like an old-fashioned 90s sex scandal for like the Major government or something like that. And I don't know if that will sort of resonate with the public in a different way, and then make them take notice of some of the sort of financial sort of corruption that's been flying about, that doesn't seem to break through to the general public in the same way. Maybe it needed something a bit more salacious and titillating to get people's attention. I don't know.
That's great words.
It's a really, really good use of words there. But it was like a total throwback to the 1990s, like tabloid juicy sex scandal, wasn't it? That we haven't really seen for quite some time, really.
Like the news of the world sort of government minister in a 4-in-a-bed romp.
Yeah, romp. There's another word I hate.
It is a word you only see that word in tabloid headlines, though. I've never heard them use that word in real life.
Ever.
We're off on a romp.
Off on a romp. So, I mean, basically just in-depth corruption going on within the government, cronyism, jobs for the pals, and clearly just expertise in spinning going on from within Number 10. And we can't really rule out massively the role that the mainstream media have played within all of these different corruption scandals that have transpired over the last, realistically in the last 6 weeks, if I'm being kind.
We've been doing this for 7 weeks. This will be episode 8, and every single week we have spoke about more Tory corruption, more Tory corruption.
And that's weekly.
And you're right about the media, though, don't keep the pressure on. It's like they report it, and then it just is allowed just to fade away, and everybody moves on. And that's not an accident, I don't think. Like, at the risk of sounding conspiratorial, the media, the whole sort of Corbyn anti-Semitism stuff, that showed that the media can keep the pressure up on a certain issue if they decide to. I mean, that was how many months that just rumbled on and just constantly get hammered at every opportunity. The Tories corruption stuff is not reinforced by the media in any way the same manner.
It's like a one-hit wonder, isn't it? You'll get the main story will come out, and then there might be a slight follow-up. There's no contextualization to the stories either. So, placing that as some sort of sex romp and, how terrible for everybody involved. And, Matt Hancock's now resigned. So, the Prime Minister himself, we can put this to bed, we can move on. There's all these other corruption, these cronyisms that's just constantly just there, present for all to see in government. Yet there's not a magnifying glass being held over it. It's just really quite worrying.
See, when you said there, that's the matter, that's the end of the matter. I
Mm.
consider that the end of the matter. Have you seen that Little Britain sketch of the
Yeah.
councillor?
Yes.
And he keeps getting himself stuck in unscrupulous situation, like in the bathroom with a young man, Eduardo and Carlos, and he just happened to fall in between the two gentlemen. And every time they do the sketch, it's more and more elaborate, the situations he's been in. And he says, and I would like to consider that the end of the matter. And it was very on point humour from the Little Britain guys. And that's an old clip.
Yeah, when that statement came out for the Prime Minister, like saying that considers that to the end of the matter, the first, I think I tweeted about it, and I just thought the most annoying thing about that is loads of the media will just agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it was like a lot of the media will just stop reporting on that now because the Prime Minister said, well, it's the end of the matter.
And casting back to February too, with all the really, really bad incompetence that Matt Hancock has overseen and essentially been responsible for. So, everything that we've discussed on Tory corruption over the last few weeks, things like test and trace and then, the issues to do with care homes and all the issues that have really impacted on people's well-being and health.
Yeah, with all that going on, and then it's having a fumble with an aid is what actually cost somebody to lose their job.
And also, Keir Starmer didn't call for Matt Hancock's resignation. And in February, he said nobody wants to see Matt Hancock resign in the middle of a global pandemic. And true to form, and in a really good way, Jeremy Corbyn tweeted as soon as Matt Hancock had resigned, saying that Matt Hancock shouldn't have resigned for X, Y, and Z. He should have resigned for all of these failings, the PPE contracts, all of these types of things. And it just kind of puts it in context that, the criticisms that Corbyn got, and I have my criticisms of Corbyn, but the criticisms of Corbyn's get, he wasn't a real opposition, we needed strong opposition, blah, blah, blah. And of course, we've got Keir Starmer, who didn't even call for the health secretary during a global pandemic, who had oversaw different processes that had impacted on so many people's lives ending and people becoming really, really ill. And he couldn't even say resign.
I've got a wee list here. It was tweeted by David Schneider, the actor, and he just said, Matt Hancock, definitely not a private matter, is the worst COVID death toll in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
He failed to protect care homes or provide enough PPE. He broke the law on contracts. He siphoned billions to unqualified pals, donors, his mate who owns his local, and he broke Ministerial Code Ari's sister's firm. So there's a lot of other things that he could have resigned for, or preferably have been fired for. I hate it when, powerful people who've been elected into these positions, they get the opportunity to resign. Anybody else gets fired, it's a P45.
Yeah,
Yes.
If it was in any other organisation, he would have found himself in a severe disciplinary a long, long time ago, and he wouldn't have had the opportunity to resign.
Yeah, there was also speculation about how the tape was leaked, and the other option is that it's some kind of rival faction within the Tory party that were gunning for him, whether it was a sort of Dominic Cummings, Michael Gove sort of cabal is another good word. And it is interesting, and if it is, it's clearly people gunning for Boris Johnson as well, because it put him in a hell of a position, because either he ends up looking so weak by backing Matt Hancock, but at the same time, how the hell can Boris seriously sack somebody for marital infidelity? It's either way, he was going to look weak or a total hypocrite. So I wonder if this is the sort of opening salvo in some kind of Tory power struggle to get rid of Boris.
I had read another tweet from another commentator saying something about the guy who broke the story for The Sun was an ex-boyfriend of Carrie.
Oh.
So yeah, just some. I mean, it is just Twitter.
So Boris, is that Boris's wife?
Yeah. Well, I think girlfriend. I can't keep up.
No, they
They're
get
married
married
now.
They get married.
He's married now. But that would be interesting.
I just didn't date somebody that works for The Sun.
Mm-hmm.
What will be interesting?
Well, she's married to Boris Johnson. I mean,
there's that.
It'll be interesting to see then if there is something to come next. If this is the sort of opening sort of shots in a kind of potential Tory power struggle.
If you've got a power struggle though, right, and this is me just being a little bit sarcastic here, right? If you've got a power struggle and you want to put somebody to be the Prime Minister, right, you choose somebody that's got a bit of charisma. You don't pick Michael Gove Because Michael Gove, right? See if this is all true, and Dominic Cummings, there's a faction fight, and Dominic Cummings is, conveniently not slagging off, he's gunning for certain individuals, but leaving people like, Michael Gove out of it, and Rishi Sunak as well. You don't pick Michael Gove, somebody like Michael Gove, who I really, even if they did manage to install him into to number 10, do we really think he would be that successful with the public?
There is one person that would pick Michael Gove, though.
Who?
Michael Gove.
Yeah, well, exactly.
So-
There is that. And Rishi Sunak as well has come out, I think it's this week as well, and said that, 19th of July needs to be the last date for the restrictions to be in place. So he's kind of shifted his little position that he's always had about business and safety of people. So he very much of the free market forces that all restrictions must be gone by the 19th of July. So that's interesting to see.
Now, well, viruses are always adhere to government timetables.
Exactly. So if the virus, which is essentially increasing, I think it's 77% or something on last week, if you could be gone by the 19th of July, so Rishi Sunak can open up the economy, that's another phrase that really bugs me. I'm starting to rant now, so I think we should finish soon. But I'm starting to rant about it. See, when people say open up the economy, right? The economy never closed. People's work, people's labour is the economy, right? What we done is we closed certain sectors because we wanted to reduce transmission. Service sector being one of the most prominent ones, yeah? So when it's like, all restrictions we need our liberty and we need our freedoms back. Well, actually, in the context of how things have been since the start of the year, we have got a lot of freedoms. We can see people, we don't have the extreme isolation, which we're feeling. I struggled with mental health during the second lockdown massively because I felt really restricted and separated from people that I really care about. But beyond that, it's like, let's just focus on being sensible. If they want to open up everything from the 19th of July in England, regardless of how the rates are, things are just going to get repel back to what they were, maybe not quite as bad, but they will get worse again. And there's going to be more restrictions put on. And it's going to delay people being able to travel and go to their caravan and wherever it is, even longer. This is the recurrent issue that's caused the lockdowns to last so long in the first place.
If mental health is really a priority, what we should be really focusing on is potentially having tougher restrictions now so that we can lift the restrictions before winter. Because I don't know about anybody else, but I found lockdown in the summer was an absolute doddle last year compared to lockdown during winter. That was really, really a struggle mentally for people, I think, because you couldn't meet up in the garden. You couldn't go for like nice summer walks. We're already sort of trapped in our own houses in winter to a certain extent without nobody able to actually go anywhere else, So I think that should be the priority rather than this arbitrary 19th of July deadline that they've decided to throw in.
And if England do go with that 19th of July, let's open everything back up. Everybody just get back to what they keep calling normality, which I hate because I don't want to go back to that. I want to continue the access to work via Zoom and, using digital platforms to their greatest capacity, having MPs and MSPs, representatives, being able to do democracy for their home, which offers, MPs like single mothers or single fathers or whatever, the opportunity to be able to do more. So I don't want to go back to a normality, but if England do decide to do that, Murdo Fraser's going to lose his mind when Nicola Sturgeon sets up a big barricade right along Hadrian's Wall. Well, no Hadrian. Well, I think we should probably do Hadrian's Wall. Bring Manchester with us. Maybe that's the solution. Maybe Manchester needs to be independent for England, become an enclave of Scotland. That'd be good.
Well, there is the Free the North party going these days.
Aye,
There is indeed,
I join Scotland. We'll get together. We'll build a big barricade, keep South England out.
On that note,
we kind of go seamlessly to the next thing, which is Dido Harding is being lined up to take over NHS England. I know we're in Scotland, so we don't have a kind of direct impact on us, but I think it does go to show the shambles the UK political system, that somebody who was described by the Daily Mail as being a serial failure. So this isn't just a left-right thing. Like, even the right wing thinks Dido Harding is just generally bad at her job. She ran Talk when they had a huge data breach. She then got appointed to the House of Lords by David Cameron, who coincidentally she went to uni with. I'm sure that had nothing to do with how she got into the House of Lords. She then ran a hospital regulator, NHS Improve, despite having zero background in healthcare. And of course, the shining example of incompetence, she ran the track and trace system for COVID, which, according to the National Audit Office, failed to contact 100,000 people over the winter that had tested positive. That's out of like 724,000. So just under 1 in 7 people that tested positive didn't get contacted and told to isolate. And also 1 in 7 of the millions of self-testing kits that was sent out to people, only 1 in 7 of them has actually been registered as used. And the current bill for all this is £37 billion, and it still doesn't work right. And somebody sees that CV and thinks, let's tap her to take over the NHS.
Corrupt and inept. What can I say?
They do kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah.
If Dido Harden takes over NHS England, then I think that will definitely be the start of the acceleration of the privatisation of the NHS. We know it's been happening in England for quite some time, but it seems to be done a bit more covertly, drip, drip, drip here, a little bit there, a little bit there. And really, perhaps Dido Harden having such a fantastic record and being incompetent. The thing is, if you want to try and privatise a public service that's really, really popular, you have to alienate people from it, or you have to get people saying it needs to change or it needs to be developed. And that seems like just the right person to actually completely dismantle the NHS from within and make it non-desirable for people, and people to become frustrated and annoyed with it, and actually start to build support for a new form of healthcare in England.
You know, I think that is a great point you made, Brian, about it is the sort of playbook for privatising public services. Is, first of all, they elect people who don't believe in those public services and don't believe in that sort of thing, and then they break it, run it down, and then after they break government, they say, oh, government doesn't work. And that's when they say we need to turn to the private sector because they run everything so much more efficiently, which we've just seen. Like, it wasn't very efficient when Dido Harding ran TalkTalk and had a massive data breach. I don't know what's efficient about that. Or when, was it Serco that ran?
Serco, yeah.
Track and trace, you know, like, I've yet to see any evidence of this kind of mantra of the private sector does things better and more efficiently than the public sector. But it's one of these things that if you're a Tory, you just keep repeating and claim to believe in.
It's just an ideological obsession, isn't it? The thing is, if you really step back and think about public services as they should be run and they should be financed, would you honestly want services that provide really complex care to individuals in social care and for older people and for really, really vulnerable people to have the motivation to create as much profit out of that delivery as possible? And that's what it really comes down to. It's just a basic, what is the motivation for this organisation delivering this service? And we've seen it in care in the care sector, both in Scotland and across the UK, where these care companies have been put out to arm's length companies, and the workers' conditions are degraded. You're on 0 hour contracts. You're not paid for your travel time. You're not paid for, if you need to stay late because somebody needs additional care, they've spilt something, you need to clean it up. You don't get paid for that. So if you allow a service like that to be run by something that's motivation is profit, then that just goes against the whole ethical stance for delivering care.
Yeah.
And that's what we really need to remember. And if you're actually going to, elevate that perception and that attitude to the head of the NHS, that's terrifying.
Well, that's a Tory mantra, isn't it? Profits over people.
Well, exactly.
I think they teach that in Oxbridge.
The last sort of Tory corruption example we've got, it's a kind of follow-on from previously. Well, Michael Gove was found to have broken the law about the awarding of a contract. It also turns out that the company that they had contracted to do research into the pandemic, they were actually doing research into attitudes to the union.
Scandalous.
So money that was supposed to be spent on fighting COVID, was actually spent on reinforcing the British Union. And it's just ties it together right back to Murdo Fraser at the start of the podcast, that the Tories just happy to play politics all through this pandemic.
Absolutely. I mean, imagine even putting those questions into, or that brief into that same contract when, we're meant to be assessing the public attitudes to public health messaging and how that's been received and how that's been understood. And then they're like, yeah, but what else is really, really important is to understand people's attitudes of the union and the constitution. I think it's absolutely disgraceful.
I know. What were the questions? Do you love the Queen? Do you want a poster?
Do you want a pop art poster?
It is a bit scandalous, isn't it? Can you imagine?
Yeah, it is.
The Scottish government had done it.
Oh,
Imagine that. What the outrage would be like, they're always going on about independence, divisive nationalism. That's what we'd get. Whereas it's really them being the divisive nationalists, isn't it? British
I mean,
nationalists.
the total double standards all
Mhm.
round. Like the Tories are still saying that Matt Hancock had there was no reason for him to resign. It was the morality police that forced him to resign. And at the same time, people were like, remember you wanted Diane Abbott sacked for having a mojito on the train?
That's right.
You know?
That's right.
She's just having a bevy on the tube, do you know what I mean? And then they're calling for resignation. And then the Tories too, like Nicola Sturgeon hadn't even given her evidence to the committee on the Alex Salmond inquiry. And they were saying they were going to put a vote of no confidence down. And everything.
That's right.
So it's like, what?
Complete
It is
double standards.
Absolute nuts.
But also worthy
then
to point out, Diane Abbott and Nicola Sturgeon are both women.
Exactly. Very, very true. And I think the litmus test for all of these types of things is these headlines that come out with all these these things that Tories are defending themselves, things that they've done. Bullying for Priti Patel, for example.
Yep.
Could you imagine if either Nicola Sturgeon was facing those allegations or Jeremy Corbyn was facing those? And just to imagine what that would be.
And then they start screaming about cancel culture.
Exactly. Because they didn't like the response they get. Mhm.
It's not cancel culture if you want a government minister to be fired for massive corruption.
Yeah.
Stop being so divisive.
You're so woke, David.
That's me.
Yeah, that word as well is just talk about disingenuously using a word that really angers me because it's just been so adopted by the certain groups of people on Twitter where it's like, oh, you're woke and then laughing about it. And you're like, yes, I am aware of the social injustice, particularly towards racial, people of colour.
Yeah,
the only
people that use the word woke unironically is like the right wing now. Like I don't know anybody that uses the word woke apart from like Andrew Neil, people like that. And it's really just, I don't know if is it saving them time because they just use woke instead of political correctness, because it's the exact same arguments that they use now. You could go back and get articles say 10, 15, 20 years ago raging about political correctness and just replace it with woke and the article would read exactly the same.
Yeah, ridiculous.
It's political correctness gone mad.
The alt-right and right-wing, they just recycle their old tropes. They never come up with any new ones. It's quite boring, really. But I just thought I'd sling this in at the end. In France, they were having some regional elections recently, and Marianne Le Pen's, what's her party called?
Front de National.
Yes, Front. Sorry, I didn't do my French accent. Front de National.
Was that your French accent?
Did it just sound Glaswegian? Front de National. They failed to win any of mainland France's 12 regions. Yes, come on, the French. Get the right wing out of there.
Yeah, and that's a year ahead of their presidential elections, isn't it? So. Yeah. That's positive because they were hoping to at least secure one. I think it was the southwest or the southeast region, and they have failed to do so. So there we are. Positive news.
It would be good if we could get a runoff that wasn't like for the French presidential elections that didn't end up coming down to like a centre-right sort of French Tory against a extreme right French fascist because the 17 left candidates cancelled each other out.
That would be nice.
We are a podcast of equal opportunities. We hate all Tories, no matter where they're from, what nationality they are.
Exactly.
Well, thanks, guys. Another great podcast in the can. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us. And if there's anything that you want us to talk about, you can tweet us at _ungagged, #Holyrude Podcast. No, sorry, that's #Holyrude Ungagged. Or email us at ungaggedleft@gmail.com and put Holyrude Ungagged in the subject line. Brian, Deborah, I've enjoyed this, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you. See you next week.
Bye. See you later.